What's up, guys? I hope you had a great weekend. If you're a Lewis Hamilton fan, I'm sure you did have a great weekend. Finally, he's done it, hasn't he? 5 times world champion. And whatever you think of Lewis, love him or hate him, you've got to just admire what he's been able to achieve. Him and his team at Mercedes. An amazing season, an amazing kind of season-long fight with Ferrari. And it was a fight. I know the last few races have seemed like it's been inevitable that Lewis has managed to, was always going to do it, and of course he was, but the season-long fight has been an intense one. They had real competition for the first time in a few seasons from outside, you know, of the walls of their own garage, and that has meant they've had to dig deep at times, because at times they definitely haven't had the fastest car, but you know, they've been close to flawless. Not flawless, but close to flawless, and far closer to flawless than Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari, their main rivals, have been. And that has been the difference. The team and the driver that made the fewest mistakes this year has rightly won the World Championship. So well done, Lewis Hamilton. It's amazing for me to think back what seems like only a few years ago, to see Lewis burst onto the scene in Formula 1 with us at McLaren, and just a year after that him take his first incredibly emotional world title with that unbelievable race in Brazil in 2008, and here he is as one of the sport's all-time great drivers, I think you've got to say, at this stage, and he's still not done yet, is he? So well done, Lewis, well done, Mercedes. But let's get into answer some of your questions, of which there have been lots again, so thank you very much. It's been a while since we did this on a dog walk, so here we are. Roll the sting. Michael Bielica, I hope I've pronounced that right, apologies if not. Michael says, with the championship come to an end, how about predictions for 2019? Can Lewis continue his winning streak up until 2020 and take 7 world titles? Well, I don't see why not. You know, whenever you get such a dominant phase of Formula 1 like Mercedes and Lewis are in right now, it normally takes a while to break that. And of course Ferrari have come close this year and have put up a decent challenge, and they could have taken the championship. So this has not been an absolute walk in the park for Merc, but there's normally, unless you get a major reset, and 2019 I'm not classing as a major reset, because still the dominant factor of a Formula 1 car is still the power unit, and that stays the same for next year. Massive aerodynamic changes, and that will give opportunities to teams, but the power unit still stays the same, and that in this modern formula is the biggest differentiator, the hybrid power unit. So that would suggest that Mercedes will still have an advantage, and as long as they kind of don't stuff up the new aero regs, which I'm sure they won't, they have every opportunity to at least challenge for another title or more. And that means, you know, we all know that Lewis will be absolutely motivated now to chase after Michael's 7 world championship record. As much as he won't say that records mean everything to him, they absolutely do. He's one of those people that he wants his name cemented in history as the greatest driver of all time, and to do that statistically he's got to top Michael. So yeah, I absolutely think he can go on to do it. I'd love to see some more challenges next year, but I definitely think Lewis is capable, and with Mercedes definitely capable, of winning again in 2019 and 2020, and who knows beyond that. I Am Legend says, did the FIA take a look at the changes to the Mercedes wheel rims again and conclude they were illegal, and could that be the cause of their tyre wear issues over the last 2 races? So no is the short answer to that. To give some context to that, in Austin the FIA took a look at the Mercedes wheel rim, and they decided that it would be legal. If the team were to race it, it would be legal and would not contravene any regulations. The regulation in question is the regulation surrounding movable aerodynamic devices. That was the regulation that got the Red Bull device back in, when was it, 2012, got that one banned. And that was because with that situation, Red Bull were using the spinning wheel to energize air and then channel that spinning and energized air out through the outboard end of the wheel to kind of aid the blown front axle system that they had on the car. It was all about dragging the front tyre wake away from the sort of parts of the car, the sensitive areas of the car. Worked very well, but because that spinning wheel was a movable part and its sole purpose at that point with that little design tweak was around aerodynamics, it therefore was concluded that it was a movable aerodynamic device. The big difference here with the Mercedes system is that they're not doing that. They are channeling air through the wheel rim and through the hub, but the whole idea behind that is about tyre temperature management. It's about transferring heat flow from the brakes and out through the wheel rim to try and prevent the tyres from overheating. So if there's an aerodynamic benefit, of which there may well be, albeit nothing like the Red Bull one, it's definitely a secondary effect off the back of this design that's all centered around tyre temperature management. So that's the reason it's been declared legal in Austin. In Austin though, the team Mercedes decided not to race it, just because if they had won the championship in Austin, they didn't want teams kind of having the ability to put in a protest, which they could do post-race, and that might, you know, hamper the result. It might taint the result and taint the celebration. So given that it's only a small effect, they decided not to race it. In Mexico, they put some more, the team gave more clarification to the stewards at the scrutineering process on Thursday. The Mexican stewards then declared that it would absolutely still be legal. If they were to race it on Sunday, they would deem that it does not contravene any regulations. The point is that any effect that it might have had aerodynamically was minimal. The effect on tyre wear, though, that you're referring to go back to your question, and lots of you have asked this, as Mercedes tyre wear issues down to this, you know, being forced, if you like, to change their wheel rim design or go back to an earlier wheel rim design? I don't believe so, not for a second. I think that that's all about the fact that in these last two races they've not been out front. They've been hampered by following cars around racetracks, and the Mercedes, we know, definitely doesn't deal with following other cars anywhere near as well as lots of other cars on the grid. Its aerodynamics are upset just too much, and therefore it slides around, and therefore it wears through its tyres incredibly quickly. And basically I think that's what it's all down to. By the way, apologies if there's loads of wind noise on this video. I've only just realised that the batteries on my external microphone have run out, so we're only using the microphone and the phone for this, so apologies, it's probably awful. Hope you can hear some of it at least. William Daly says, why are Mercedes the only team to open up the bodywork behind the driver for cooling? How effective can it be, and would it compromise performance? Well, I talked in the video on Thursday, I think it was, about how Formula 1 cars are affected by altitude at Mexico City, where it's highlighted most, of course, and cooling sorry, like a pair of Tasmanian devils just tearing through the undergrowth. Cooling is one of those areas that is really affected quite heavily in Mexico City because the air is just so thin, therefore there's less of it to cool things like brakes and the power unit. So the team will go to a race like that with their best predictions through simulation of what temperatures will be like and how much they need, how much cooling option they need on the car to be able to deal with those ambient temperatures and the lack of cooling ability. But sometimes you get to a racetrack and, you know, either the ambient's a lot higher than it was, or the effect of temperatures is greater than you expected, and you have to do something about it. And if you're at max cooling levels, which in Mexico City most teams would be, you have to do something. So you've got to kind of, you often find teams cutting holes or opening up bits of bodywork, sometimes quite crudely with, you know, little angle grinders or pencil grinders, just to make holes in things to allow more air to flow through these parts of the car. The reason Mercedes have chosen to do it behind the driver behind the cockpit is utterly dependent on the layout of their power unit, and if they are the only team that have done that, it's because their particular installation means that that must be the most effective place in the field that they can open up to allow more airflow through. Is it going to be effective? Well, yes, it'll be effective, otherwise they just wouldn't have done it. Is it going to compromise performance? Yes, it will do as well, because if it didn't compromise performance, they would have had that option on the car straight out of the drawing office, straight out of the design studio. So yes, it's a compromise, but when you're in the field and you've got a car that's potentially going to overheat, compromise is what you have to do. Peter Wright says, to help the overtaking of lapped cars, could the blue flag light on the steering wheel be linked to a DIS system, as you call it, a drag introduction system, essentially DRS in reverse? I see where you're going with this, Peter, but the problem with doing something that dramatically changes the performance of the car, particularly aerodynamic downforce, without that being under the, completely under the driver's control, is it presents a rather big safety issue, because if he's suddenly tearing along a straight and all of a sudden he gets the aerodynamics change on his car and it's starting to do something that he's not expecting, you can see the problems with that. So I don't think that's the issue. I think there are far more problems that need to be sorted out, fundamental problems which are at the heart of all of this whole overtaking problem or issue, challenge, whatever you want to call it, that we have in Formula One. For me, we need to go to the drawing board, which they're trying to do, let's not forget. That's part of the reason we're rushing through these 2019 regs, to try and aid overtaking and the following. And hopefully, having done those things, then again, with a greater step in 2021, all of these side issues, like the lapping slower cars and getting past traffic, will all be sorted out as a consequence, I hope. Right, back from the dog walk, and I've got a couple more questions to fire through before we finish. Firstly, this one from Steve McSween, who says, can the drivers talk to each other over the radio during the race? And if so, do they? Wow, right, first of all, to answer the question, no, they can't. But, oh my God, how good would it be if they could? I would love to hear that. Can you imagine one driver overtaking another and just, giving them a bit of verbal sledging on the way past? Or if he's being held up, the abuse is going to be hurling at each other. If you could just flick a button and talk to one of the other drivers on the track, I would love that. Oh my goodness. Liberty Media, consider it, please. Thank you very much, Steve. Great question. This one from Kishore Kafle says, McLaren said they had the best chassis last year. This year we know that that's not the case. While Red Bull qualified first, they were 12th in Mexico. It's late in the season, but couldn't they have made another chassis and discarded this one? Or does the FIA have restrictions on this? Well, there's no restrictions on it. So yes, in theory, any team can bin its car halfway through the season and go to the lengths of designing and manufacturing another one, as long as it goes through all the same safety tests and passes the crash tests and all of those kind of things. So yes, in theory, it's possible. But you've got to remember, when we talk about the chassis, it's not just the chassis, it's not just the monocoque, it's the concept of this McLaren car that just clearly isn't working. And a lot of that is aerodynamic, some of that may be mechanical as well, and a combination of the two, but it's not working. So the whole concept is wrong. But you have to appreciate that when McLaren designed it, they obviously thought it was going to work. So all of their predictions and their simulations said this was the way to go, and they followed that path. Clearly, when they put it onto a racetrack, in reality, it didn't play out that way. So they have to understand the reasons for that. They can go back to the drawing board, but if their drawing board is pointing them in a certain direction, which is clearly now obviously the wrong direction, do they fully understand why they went in the wrong direction? And do they fully understand why all of their simulation tools and their predictive tools sent them in that direction in the first place? So those are big questions. Let's assume they do understand exactly what went wrong and why they've gone down that path. Well, there's a huge amount of work and effort and resource and time that goes into redesigning. Imagine the car they've got right now that first hit the racetracks in, when was it, February, when we had pre-season testing? Well, work on that started probably 12 months earlier. And so to suddenly go halfway through a season and say, right, we need a new car, it's not just a quick fix, unfortunately. And on top of all of those things that would really hold you back from doing that, you have to appreciate that next year we've got a completely different car coming, haven't we? The new regulations for 2019 mean that the aerodynamic concept of a car, of all of the cars, is going to be totally different. So it's just not worth them putting that amount of resource and energy into something for the second half of this year that would then pretty much go into the bin at the end of the season as we move into 2019. Right, and finally, this one from Poochie Mama. Love the Twitter name, I think that one was. Poochie Mama. That says, at the beginning of Q3 at the Mexican GP, the marshals inside the pit lane lift their arms up as a car passes by. Do you know why and what it's for? I do know why. It's actually it's pretty boring really, but I should answer it because it may be that some people don't know. As a car drives along the pit lane, the marshals in the pit lane have to stand there. This is part of their protocol. They stand there at various set points along the pit lane. As that car passes them, they actually blow a whistle and raise their hand in the air. And it's just a visual and audible sign of where that moving car is in the pit lane. So if there's another marshal, sometimes at the end of a very busy pit lane, you can imagine in the build-up to qualifying in the race, there are people everywhere, and all you can see from one end to the other is a sea of people. And if a car is coming along the pit lane, the marshals just blow their whistle, and because when you hear a whistle blown, you may turn your head, and the only way you're going to know which one of those marshals has blown that whistle is if they put their hand in the air. And that just gives the other marshals an idea of where that moving car is at any given time in the pit lane. So that's why they do it. It kind of makes some sense when you think of it that way. You could probably do it with some sort of technology and lights, I imagine, running down a pit lane, but it's an old school thing. They've been doing it for years, and I guess they still do it in Mexico. Alright, there you go. We're going to stop it there. Thank you very much again for all of your questions and all of the input. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. Keep them coming, because I will continue to try and answer them online as well. I'm off to Barcelona early tomorrow morning for a couple of days on a business trip. So I will desperately try and get an Electric Tuesday video up tomorrow. But if I can't, that's the reason why. Right, enjoy your Monday, folks. Speak soon.